The Roman Empire didn't fall. It survived for 1,000 more years as something else. 476 AD. A teenage emperor named Romulus Augustulus hands his crown to a Germanic general. Every textbook calls this the fall of Rome. It's the sentence that ends the chapter, closes the book, cues the Dark Ages music. But that sentence is wrong. Because 700 miles east, in a city ringed by triple walls and washed by the waters of the Bosphorus, a Roman emperor was still ruling, still issuing Roman law, still commanding Roman legions. And he would keep doing it for another 977 years. Here's what most people think they know. Rome fell, the empire ended, and Europe stumbled into darkness until the Renaissance woke it back up. That's the story we all absorbed from a single textbook paragraph and never questioned again. But the people living in Constantinople in the year 1000, nearly 5 centuries after Rome supposedly fell, didn't think their empire had ended at all. They called themselves Romaioi, Romans, not Greeks, not Byzantines, Romans, full stop. And they meant it with total sincerity. By the end of this video, you'll understand why historians now argue the fall of Rome is one of the most misleading dates in all of history, and how an empire hiding in plain sight right through the Crusades, right up until cannons breached its walls in 1453, kept calling itself Rome the entire time. This channel rebuilds these cities and these moments using archaeological records and primary sources, because the real story doesn't need embellishment. It just needs to be told properly. Let's start with the version of this empire's identity that almost nobody teaches, because it's the detail that unravels the entire myth. The word Byzantine is not Roman. It was never used by a single person who lived in this empire. It was invented in 1557, over a century after the empire had actually ended, by a German historian named Hieronymus Wolff, who needed a tidy label to separate ancient Rome from this awkward, inconvenient Roman Empire that refused to stop existing. Therefore, when you hear Byzantine Empire, you're hearing a name its own citizens never spoke. They called their state Basileia Romaion, the Empire of the Romans. Their coins said Roman, their law said Roman, their emperors, all the way to the last one, Constantine XI, styled themselves as the direct successors of Augustus. That alone should rewrite how you picture the year 1000 AD. But identity is easy to claim and hard to prove. So let's look at what this empire actually kept running, because the second insight is even stranger than the first. In 529 AD, the Emperor Justinian commissioned a legal scholar named Tribonian to do something almost absurd in scope: collect, organize, and rewrite 9 centuries of scattered Roman law into one coherent code. The result was the Corpus Juris Civilis, the body of civil law. Picture a room in Constantinople, stacked with scrolls, legal opinions, and imperial decrees, going back to the 12 tables of the 5th century BC, with scribes cross-referencing contradictions by lamplight for 6 years straight. Therefore, when Justinian's code was finished, it didn't just organize the past, it became the blueprint for the future. This is the part that tends to stop people cold. Large portions of that code, written in a Roman court over 1,400 years ago, still underlie civil law systems across modern France, Germany, Italy, and dozens of other countries today. You are not just watching a documentary about a dead empire. You are watching the origin story of legal systems currently in use. That's not folklore. That's a direct, traceable legal lineage. And it means Rome, in a very real sense, never stopped legislating your world. But if the law survived, what about the empire's ability to simply not get conquered? Because for 1,000 years after 476 AD, that's exactly what didn't happen. And the reason involves one of the most underrated engineering achievements in ancient history. Constantinople was protected by the Theodosian Walls. a triple-layered defence system finished in the early 5th century, consisting of an outer moat, a low outer wall, and a massive inner wall over 40 feet high. For context, imagine standing at the base of that inner wall as an attacking soldier. You'd have already crossed a moat, scaled one wall under arrow fire, and now face a second, taller wall, bristling with towers every 55 yards. Armies tried and failed to break through these walls for over 1,000 years. Avars, Arabs, Bulgars, Rus raiders, all turned back. Therefore, Constantinople earned a reputation as the city that could not be taken by force. It finally fell in 1453, and even then, it wasn't decayed defences that beat it. It was a Hungarian engineer named Orban who built the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II a cannon so massive it took 60 oxen to move, firing stone balls that could shatter walls unmoved by a millennium of human wars. Therefore, the empire didn't crumble from within like the myth suggests. It took gunpowder, purpose-built to overcome a specific medieval defence, to finally end what conventional armies couldn't touch for centuries. That's a civilization that had to be dragged into the age of gunpowder to be defeated, not one that quietly faded away. But walls and cannons only tell you how the empire ended. They don't tell you what it felt like to live inside it while it was thriving. And this is where the continuity gets almost eerie. Walk into the Hippodrome of Constantinople on a race day in the 6th century, and you'd hear roughly 100,000 voices screaming for two chariot factions, the Blues and the Greens, with a fervour that occasionally spilled into actual riots. Most famously, the Nika riots of 532 AD, which burned half the city and killed tens of thousands before Justinian's general Belisarius crushed the mob inside that very stadium. The emperor, sitting in the imperial box that day, held a title, consul, that had existed since the founding of the Roman Republic nearly 1,000 years earlier. The Senate that met in Constantinople traced its institutional lineage directly back to the Senate that Julius Caesar once addressed. This wasn't cosplay. This was an unbroken civic thread running from the Republic, through Augustus, through Justinian, and all the way to a medieval Roman citizen watching a chariot race with a bag of roasted chestnuts, arguing about the Greens like it was a modern derby. You weren't watching the ghost of Rome. You were watching Rome, still very much alive, just wearing different clothes and speaking Greek instead of Latin. So here's the reframe worth sitting with. Rome didn't fall in 476 AD. One half of it did, the poorer, more fractured western half, overrun by groups it could no longer hold off. But the wealthier, more defensible eastern half kept its laws, its titles, its institutions, and its self-identity as Rome for nearly 1,000 years after the fall you were taught in school. It didn't end with a bang in 476. It ended with a Hungarian-built cannon, a breached wall, and a last emperor named Constantine, the same name as the first, dying in the street, fighting for a city called New Rome in 1453. Rome didn't fall once. It fell twice, 1,000 years apart, and everything you were taught happened in between was actually still Rome.